Abandoned shopping centers, seasonal businesses in the off-season, a certain brand of suburban sadness. These are the themes that attract songwriter Matthew Milia. Matthew was raised in a place that contains all of that sadness and some happy childhood memories as well. A Detroit suburb called Keego Harbor, which happens to be the name of his second solo album. Matthew was the songwriter behind the band Frontier Ruckus, which spent a decade on the road touring everywhere, with a roots rock blend similar to their once bandmates, Avett Brothers, but fittingly for a Detroit band with more emphasis on the rock than roots. After 10 years, there were some other things Matthew wanted to try in his life, like marriage and a regular schedule, and musically, through his solo debut in 2019 and then Keego Harbor last year. Frontier Ruckus will also have more new music later this year, but Matthew dropped by recently with his band, and they are our guests this week on Acoustic Cafe.
What I want to do to start with the most universal part of Keego Harbor. These are themes that you have hit upon before, most certainly, in Frontier Ruckus and through the past. And it's finding that inspiration in the downside. It's the day-to-day grind in less than glamorous places. And sort of in our current time, we're learning that it is everybody. Like, most people do this, right? Most people live these lives in these kinds of places. Right?
Yeah, I find immense comfort in quotidian banality, I guess you'd say. And it's become this common denominator that we all share, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, the grind of life. I've been accused of being morose in the past, but I find great joy in it. It's a binding kind of humanity, and Keego Harbor to me represents that. I don't know. It's just, and I've also kind of used specificity as a crutch. The more narrow and local the lens that I write for and within, the more agency I feel, and it gives me a sense of purpose and power within this. You know, the outside world has a tendency of feeling very ominous and dangerous and scary. If I limit the boundaries of my world and kind of work within that, I feel an immense sense of power.
So for those who are not where we are, which is reasonably close to this place called Keego Harbor, explain to people what kind of place this was and maybe how it has changed from what you remember as a small child to then growing into adulthood, and how it's just a different place now.
Well, yeah, it's in the middle of all these glacial lakes. It's like 20 miles north or so of Detroit. So in the late 1800s, it was a resort town. Like all these little lakes had, quaint little resorts, and then it gradually became just, Detroit built out until it reached Keego Harbor. It's wedged between very affluent realms, some of the richest suburbs in the country, actually. So it's this really interesting melding pot of economic status and humanity and socioeconomic structures. I grew up there, and my parents met there. So it's like this generational layering of hopes and dreams, and it's like this weird microcosm of the American dream and its failings.
Well, right. No, I mean, it's really a great, and that's sort of where I get back to that universality, and that we're all sort of living with late stage capitalism now.
Yes.
Especially in the United States. These are the towns that represent this. So, boom times for, in this case, the auto industry, probably about the time when your parents met. But as that industry has suffered decline, the blowback then comes to all of the adjoining communities. So,
right. I like writing about the suburban life because it's seen, I think, erroneously as this monolithic, idyllic structure that's, has a veneer. It's perfect. It represents a perfect model of the American dream, but it's really just as beautifully flawed as anything else. It's been decaying in America for decades. From a writerly standpoint, there's just so much, it's just rife with so much humanity to explore.
Someday I think I'll move back to Keego Harbor. Rent an upstairs room where the pear trees bloom for the barber that I used to see since the age of 3 in Keego Harbor. My parents met in a bar in Keego Harbor. And the video store isn't there anymore by the water of dollar lake where there's so much at stake in Keego Harbor. Maybe I would get a shift working at that all-night gift shop at the hospital, where the brink of luxury meets the stink of drudgery. I'll find a place where it's all possible. In Keego Harbor, it's all possible. In the first part of life, you just let in the light and you loop it like a DVD menu. And someday in your 30s, all your colors lose their bite, and you can't change the channel now, can you? So you just re-sign the lease in perpetuity. You can do your grocery shopping in a blindfold with acuity. You still feel the magic in the parking lot at dusk, though it's getting kinda hard to say what year it is. But I kept the sacred place safe inside of me. I kept it safe through all the foreign things I tried to be, like the robin's nest nestled in the letter C in the mini-mall sign for Nail City, where Orchard Lake bends and the trailer park ends, and your affluent friend's dad had offices where no one else could know the esoteric way to glow with the late fall chemical processes. And our uncles, they were all in their mid-30s once. They dropped by to check our height charts every couple months. We slowly outgrew everything that we knew, till we stood inside a world that looked so odd to us. Keego Harbor waits for me. The inland lakes and rusting phone lines, disintegrating subdivisions where your parents wait out winter at the center of your little. The world is falling all to pieces. June implodes and then releases sports arenas from our child. But someday I think I'll move back to Keego Harbor, rent an upstairs room where the pear trees bloom for the barber. And though they smell like death, it's the sweetest breath in Keego Harbor. Someday I think I'll move back to Keego Harbor, 'cause keeping alive's hard, but giving up's even harder. And I'm not ready to die, I'll just go simplify in Keego Harbor.
The song is called Keego Harbor, and that is also the title track to the new album, a solo release from our in-studio guest this week on Acoustic Cafe, Matthew Milia.
When you started writing, there's another way to go. There's a flip side to being in a place like that and being a writer, which is to write your way out of that place. You know, like envision different worlds, different characters, different scenarios, and create whole new worlds with your writing, which you are able to do. Your writing can transcend the place where you actually are. I'm wondering if before you locked onto the beauty of exactly where you were and writing about that place and those circumstances, if you tried to do the other, like just kind of create whole other worlds, you know, with your writing.
I mean, this has all been, following the result of 10 years on the road with Frontier Ruckus, where I was living such an outward existence, barely ever coming back to Keego Harbor, maybe, a couple times a year, like 300 days of of the year spent on the road. I never really had a calling to try to encapsulate those experiences in the songs themselves. It's like James Joyce having to go to London to write about Dublin. Like the more you go away from some place, the more that becomes your fantasy. The memory you're trying to recapture becomes the fantasy. And like you keep using the word universal, like for me, universality is housed within specificity. They say write what you know, and what I know is a place like Keego Harbor, if not Keego Harbor itself, and on this record. So the more specifically and poignantly I can capture that, the more I feel like I am actually kind of reining in those experiences that I had in Europe or California. It's like the first time that we played in London, there were people singing along to Frontier Ruckus songs, and it blew my mind. It made no sense. And they said, you might as well have been writing about my town. And that kind of like inner translation that's possible through music, no matter where you're from, like you said, there's a common denominator that everyone shares.
Another thing sort of occurred to me when I thought about the places, a lot of the places that you chronicle on Keego Harbor and previously. These are places in great decay. Like they're on their way going back to seed. I mean, they're on their way down. But it's interesting that your songs kind of capture them forever in this particular state of decline. Like eventually the actual place is going to go away. Somebody's going to knock it down and build up a new thing. These sort of stand as witness, like you're bearing witness to the state of decay.
I've always felt a certain documentary and purpose for what I do. I consider some of my songs catalogs, where I'm literally just listing things as just objects sometimes, or like the sequence of chain restaurants, or Taco Bell, Burger King. Like just so for me, for some reason, like having some record of the way it was, I need to remember how it was specifically, like down to every molecule for some reason. And my mom was like that too. I think it's a genetic thing. If we would throw out an old kitchen appliance or something, my mom would use an entire disposable camera roll to document every shelf of all the items that we had in the fridge, or an old microwave or something. It's it's a genetic thing, I think. And we're in the most uncertain times. I mean, maybe it's narcissism to think you're in the most uncertain times. I'm sure everyone has felt that they've been in the last generation to live on the face of the earth, but things feel pretty bad right now. So it's like you said, I just feel called to be very specific.
Snowflakes big as bumblebees, McMansions through the twilight trees, the sterile solace hibernating there. The weekend comes, we'll have some fun. I feel so bad for anyone divorced from that sweet force that made them care. And I haven't heard you laugh in a long time. 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 Sorrow fills the yard, and all along the boulevard, buses growling northward to our home. The lilacs bloom and I'll be there, a bathroom where the light's so rare, streaking in a childhood monochrome. And I haven't heard you laugh in a long time. 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 Everyone that you know has got a reason to hold on to the flow that sent them into the present
Haven't Heard You Laugh in a Long Time is the name of that, performed live in our studios by our guest this week, Matthew Milia. Matthew leads the band called Frontier Ruckus, which will have more music later on this year, but currently the topic of discussion is an album called Keego Harbor, his second solo release. This week on Acoustic Cafe.
Keego Harbor, this is your second solo album in really just a few years, but there was this solid decade before that and 5 albums with Frontier Ruckus, and as you mentioned, a good bit of touring. Now that you are, 5 years removed from the last Frontier Ruckus album, and if I understand it, there's more on the way.
Yeah.
Can you now, though, place this period of time as a unique period of time for you and your writing, or really is it just writing, regardless of what the end point, the destination is going to be for those songs?
It just corresponds with the ages I was going through.
Okay.
And I'm so thankful. I mean, it's the most comprehensive diary a person could have to map the emotional states of a young man navigating his 20s. It's really interesting to look back upon. Like the first 2 records are so naive and raw, and I didn't know any of the rules, so I didn't know I was breaking them, and like the chord progressions are strange, and there's dissonance, and some of the instrumentation is out of tune, and it's beautiful in that way. It's like it represents what it's like to be in your early 20s. You don't know what you're doing, and it's beautiful. And then by the 3rd record, there was like Our Blood on the Tracks, because I was going through a breakup, or it's like it just beautifully maps onto my life. Now I'm in my mid to late 30s, and this is the first record I've made as a married man, and a very happy one at that. So there's a sense of completion and like patience that I've kind of obtained in my writing now, where I can look at everything with a bit more of a sense of humor. I'm still, as you said, tackling very morose at times things, but there's a winkingness to it. I wouldn't call it a resignation, but I've had hopes and dreams that, there's such a beauty to recalibration of dreams. When I started off with those first 2 records, I had a very specific idea of what it meant to make it as a songwriter. We didn't know we were at the beginning of a boom of Americana or roots music. It kind of really hit right after we released the Oregon Songbook, when the Avett Brothers manager called us up and he's like, it kind of resembles what's happening right now. Can I manage you and put out your next record? We're like, sure. And before you know it, like everyone's doing the 4 on the Floor, anthemic Mumford & Sons, Lumineers thing, which, it touched a lot of people's lives, but it kind of messed with our career and helped our career at the same token. That whole thing is, that's ancient history already. There is acoustic guitar on the radio these days, but it's totally different. The booms pop and new things come and go. I don't think that's anything unique to my generation, but like I said, you have to recalibrate what it means to you to make it, or why you do it in the first place.
Do you have like more inner satisfaction just with the craft of songwriting, because you've now been doing it for a long time, and you can take joy in just that? So whatever the professional goal was at 21, that's a creative and artistic goal.
That's exactly what I mean. That was always the driving force. Was that artistic need to write? Like before that manager called us, I didn't really have industrial aspirations. It was kind of superimposed onto me, and I was glad to try it out. I was like, oh, this is exciting. We're gonna have a booking agent. Someone's gonna book engagements for us, and we're gonna travel. By recalibration, I mean returning to that pure initial motive for doing all of this. And I like writing more than I like performing. I had to become a showman or try to be one to make the career work. But I always felt kind of uncomfortable on stage. And I think that's probably a reason we didn't get as far as some of those aforementioned acts. I couldn't really muster the strength to bang my foot on the floor and put my fist in the air and be that guy. I liked writing the songs. And I liked writing really long songs with lots of words that take patience and hark back to maybe a different era of the singer-songwriter model. They're album-centric. I consider my craft to be writing a full album.
The Hail Mary you sent me was a full week tardy. Oh, I just want to be the cigarette you sneak outside your family Thanksgiving party. And the resentment's grown larger. It's fully juiced on your forgotten phone charger that's still plugged in beneath my bedside table. It channels something I'm unable to label. And when I go out walking dusk sounds like my past lives talking. Oh, I don't wanna see the sun. I don't wanna see anyone. What remains now but inherited cars, the stars' smoky evacuation. If you tried to abduct me, I'd make it back. Sleep in the black high school tomb. Time can corrupt the immaculate lab that's left there in the back bedroom, or steal the feel that's ours as the dusk shadows straddle the bars of our inherited cars. You eyeball yourself in the gas station mirror and set off the auto hair and dryer. You can't recognize your face, but you recognize the fear that you might be a compulsive liar. You drive past the complex where your grandparents answered the phone at the end of their days. You've lost any context for the world that was transferred to you in the subtlest ways. What remains now but inherited cars and the stars' smoky evacuation. If you tried to abduct me, I'd make it back. Sleep in the black high school tomb. Time can corrupt the miraculous lab that's left there in the back bedroom, or steal the feel that's ours as the dust shadows straddle the bars of our inherited cars.
The song Inherited Cars, the original you'll find on that album Keego Harbor, as performed live in our studios at Acoustic Cafe by Matthew Milia.
So you have moved away from Keego Harbor. Not too far. You also have a day job, which is writing copy for an ad agency. Do these worlds collide a little bit? And I have seen others ask you if copywriting affects your songwriting. That's not actually my question. My question is that, ad copy is the promise of dreams fulfilled. That's what it always has been. That's what advertising is, the promise of dreams fulfilled. Keego Harbor is sort of the reality of unfulfilled dreams.
And trust me, the irony is not lost on me.
Okay.
I write songs about chronicling late stage capitalism, and then I go to my job and promote capitalism. But you also asked if I write fantasy, and I would say my day job is where I write fantastically. It's a beautiful challenge. It does definitely overlap with songwriting, and I only have any success in that field because of the decade I spent honing my voice as a writer and believing in an ethos. Every brand, every product has a spirit that they're selling to people to believe in, and writing effectively to that spirit it's a bit of a gimmick. The assignments that are really awesome are the ones where you believe in it yourself, because I like products. I
buy products.
I'm materialistic.
Right.
I'm consumeristic.
Right.
I write about that a lot in my songs. As I said, like chronicling chain stores, and American consumerism is a major motif in all of my songwriting. So it definitely overlaps beautifully. You know, when I had to find a real job after 10 years of touring, I threw a dart at the board and it hit advertising. And I'm so glad. I can't imagine any other field I could even tolerate.
Well, Keego Harbor and a forthcoming Frontier Ruckus album done during the pandemic. You also got married right at the start. Lauren is here with us today. Right at the start of the lockdown. Did you have a chance to have a normal anything?
We got married on February 8th.
Oh.
Right before people knew about COVID.
Yeah.
And one of my groomsmen actually flew over from China. No one was wearing masks yet. It was right before things shut down. So we couldn't have been more lucky to get that off without a hitch. Our honeymoon got canceled. We did make up for it later in the pandemic going down to Mexico City.
All right. So life feels a little bit normal?
Just
kind of normal?
As much as it does for anyone.
Spring world smells like wet humans and rotten mulch, and the lilacs might done to death climax. Well, I don't care, they're all I've got there. The dumpsters behind the bleak tanning salons, the entire spring world is just broken roads and damn coupons. In the after rain, the smell that I can't explain, petrichor mingled in your hair. You look so blissfully high after you've had yourself a good cry. I know that you are mine, trailing behind the dumb vanity plates, out past the outrageous Bloomfield Hills mansion estates. The lunchtimers, sad corporate climbers are driving home into the hot sun. Last night I slept in a hospital recliner next to your bed, and I watched the tubes exit your hand. Then I wept alone in a diner, pitifully prayed that you're not one. You look so blissfully high after you've had yourself
Sunburned Landscapers, the name of the song. Again, the original is on the new album, which is Matthew Milia's second solo release. It's called Keego Harbor. Matthew Milia, our in-studio guest on the program this week, joined by his wife Lauren on harmony vocals, Lauren Milia. Pete Ballard played the pedal steel. On bass, it was Ben Collins, and on drums, Connor Dodson. You can find out more about Matthew Milia as a solo artist and as a part of Frontier Ruckus by going to MatthewMilia.com. That's Milia. Thanks for listening to the guest portion of Acoustic Cafe this week. You can hear the whole 2-hour show through our website at acafe.com or on many of your favorite local radio stations around the country and around the world. And again, you can always follow us on Twitter at ACafeRadio. I'm your host, Rob Reinhart. Thanks for listening.